CBS Sports released a new projection of the Duke basketball starting lineups going into the 2025-2026 season, and I think they got it right.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is J.J. Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us today on Monday, September 1st, 2025. Happy Labor Day. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. On today's show, I want to talk basketball, this new starting lineup projection coming from CBS Sports. We'll touch on Duke football ahead of a big game coming up this weekend against Illinois, and then we'll recap the weekend that just concluded, a look around Duke athletics, all of that coming up here on today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Go ahead and make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and written review, particularly there on the Apple Podcast platform. Your support there means so much to us. You can follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils. I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And then finally, make sure you watch our show each and every day on YouTube. We recently celebrated 4,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we're going to continue to climb the charts. Thank you for making us a part of your routine each and every day. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Shout out to all of you everydayers out there. All right, so CBS Sports put together a brand new top 25, and with every top 25 team, they put forward their starting lineup projections based on intel and things that they had been receiving. And we'll go through that top 10 here, and I'll tell you why I think they got it right in regards to Duke's starting lineup here. So the top 10 from CBS Sports going into the new college basketball season features Rick Pitino's St. John's, number 1. Shout out to the Johnnies as the number 1 team in the country. Houston at number 2, BYU 3, Purdue 4, UConn 5, Florida 6, Texas Tech 7, Michigan 8, Duke coming in at 9, and then UCLA 10. So there's a rundown of your top 10 according to CBS Sports, that are projections going into the new season. This is something that we talked about last week on the show, where this is about the range where everybody's been slotting Duke. Despite Duke being one of the 3 or 4 best betting odds to win the national championship, they're down in the 8, 9, 10 range for where people think this team will be going into the season. And CBS Sports is the latest example of that. Again, they project Duke to come in as the number 9 team going into the new season. Their starting lineup projection looks like this. It features Caleb Foster and Isaiah Evans making up your backcourt. You've got Dame Sarr on the wing, along with Cam Boozer, and then Pat Ngongba on the inside. I think that's right. I think when you look at the starting lineup right now, those are the 5 guys that you would see for the Duke basketball team. Recently, John Shire appeared on the DBR podcast. Those guys, Jayson and Donald, who we have on Locked On Blue Devils here frequently, tried to get them to open up a little bit about the starting 5, and Coach Shire wasn't giving them much at all, as you would expect this time of year, mentioning that the team hasn't been together, hasn't been whole so far, really, with Malik Brown coming back from injury, off-season procedure for Pat Ngongba to clean up a thing or two. It was a late arrival for Nick Kaminia as he was participating with the Team USA U19 team. And then remember, it was late additions to the Duke basketball roster, recruiting, adding somebody like Dame Sarr and Sebastian Wilkins. So it hasn't been as much time with them on the court. That said, coach speak aside, I think when you look at this Duke basketball team, this is the starting lineup today that makes the most sense for me. Cameron Boozer is the most obvious one here, right? A guy that's projected to be a top 3 pick in next year's NBA draft. The sky is the limit for him. There is no world in which he is not starting for Duke basketball. He's a player who's going to be able to do a little bit of everything for this Duke basketball team, and a guy that I'm really excited to get to watch play this upcoming season. So Cam, super obvious starter for the Duke basketball team. I think the other really obvious one for the Blue Devils is Isaiah Evans. This is a guy that Duke was pushing really hard for to get him to come back for his sophomore season. The NBA was a possibility. Transferring appeared to be a possibility as well. We talked about all the rumors throughout the offseason with NC State in particular for Isaiah Evans, a Charlotte native, another in-state school trying to poach our guy. But Slim said, no, I'm loyal to Duke. I'm coming back. Duke ponied up handsomely, I'm sure, with what they're paying Isaiah Evans going into this upcoming season. All that said, he's the guy that's going to be in your starting lineup, and I think we're going to see a really big season for Slim. Let me throw out our number that we always talk about with him, 82% of his shot attempts from three-point range this past season. I'm hearing Shire talk about him highly going into the upcoming season, and we're going to see a more diverse game from Isaiah Evans where we don't see as large of a volume of three-point shots. You see him put him on the deck a little bit more, use his length and body frame to his advantage, but we'll still be able to see a knockdown shooter in Isaiah Evans for the Duke basketball team. So I think he's an obvious starter for the Blue Devils as well. The other guy I think that's got to fit in that category is Dame Sarr. And I know that a lot of people were a little underwhelmed with what we saw out of him in the open practice that by now everybody's got clips up of. You know, Duke put out a whole new Duke Blue Planet episode around the event. You got to hear John Shire mic'd up as they were going through it. And fans, shout out to Duke fans out there. Isaiah Evans' mom being one of them even, have put up like the whole video of the practice. So if you missed it, you can go find it on YouTube. But Dame Sarr, a little underwhelming in that, and yet I'm not concerned. I think this is a guy who's going to be a great player for Duke this season. I think he will continue to climb draft boards going into the next season. Look, when you're 17, 18 years old and getting the opportunities that he was at FC Barcelona, one of the top clubs in the entire world, yeah, you're going to play once you transition over to the college game. Duke pivoted off of Cedric Coward when he stayed in the draft, brought Dame Sarr in to be a part of the mix, and I think he's going to have a really big role for this Duke basketball team this season. I think it's pretty clear he'll be one of your starters. Caleb Foster, the starter at point guard right now, I think that's a safe projection. This is the same boat that we were in last year, where Caleb Foster started the year as the point guard, and 8 or 9 games into the season, Sion James took that spot over from him, and Foster had to really battle and work his way back into that starting lineup for Duke. I think he's earned the right to be your starter going into it, although Caden Boozer is really going to push him, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a switch up there again, which you would hate it for Caleb Foster. Everything he went through last season, so many people didn't even think he would still be on the team. A lot of people thought, yeah, this is a guy that's going to be destined for the transfer portal, but he remained loyal to Duke, stuck around to fight, and I think he's earned the opportunity to be a starter for the Duke basketball team. So really, really excited for him to get back after it and to be a starter for the Duke team. If he does lose that job at some point this season, I think there's still a role for him. I think he learned from kind of moving to the bench this past season, and I think he'll be an instant scoring spark off the bench for Duke, whereas Caden Boozer might be that more natural point guard for you. And then the last starter is an interesting one in Pat Ngongba. Now, I'll be honest, guys, when the first, when I first started to think about this, and I've even mentioned this, everydayers will know, I'm big on Malik Brown. Not to say I'm not on Pat Ngongba II, but boy, what Malik Brown can do for this team. We saw it every time he was on the floor. He made an impact. And in a little part of me thinks maybe you start him. Maybe he's the guy that you start to be a defensive stalwart for the Duke basketball team and help you get stops on that end of the floor. But then the other part of me knows that Pat Ngongba is a little bit further ahead offensively, and maybe you rely on the spark that Malik Brown could provide coming off the bench. I think that beyond the point guard position, where a lot of people may want to talk about that Caleb Foster versus Cade Boozer dynamic, I'm more interested in Pat Ngongba versus Malik Brown. And again, I hate that we're having to pit these guys against one another. I think there's going to be worlds where they're both having to play on the floor together, even when you're giving Cam Boozer a breather. Remember, one of the kind of weaknesses you could say for the Duke team would be that front court depth. I think ultimately, though, Duke will go for Pat Ngongba, who's a little bit of a larger frame to kind of start there on the interior. Although, yeah, part of me for a while thought maybe we'd be in a position for it to be a Malik Brown and Cam Boozer starting lineup there for Duke. So found that interesting. Really excited for the Duke basketball team, and anybody that's putting out kind of their projections on starting lineups or where this Duke team ranks amongst the rest of college basketball, we're going to keep an eye on it. And so there you go. CBS Sports, that's their projection for the Duke starting lineup. In just a moment, we'll talk about the Duke football victory over Elon, and then we'll get into this week's game against Illinois. Big-time test coming up for Duke. That's coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. That's right. When I'm thinking about places to get tickets, there's no better place to go than Game Time. College football is back. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energies in the stands, there's nothing like it. Let's be real, though. Actually getting tickets can feel more of a battle than the game itself. Endless waiting queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and so much more. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives you the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I'm able to see amazing deals. I'm talking about college football games as low as $25. What are you waiting for? Go check it all out. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Game Time is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Our show today is also brought to you by The Game. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would definitely be The Game. They sent me awesome product here that you should go check out, Duke fans. Talking about The Game here. It's awesome. They aren't just hats. They're the same vintage style hats wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. So when you use code LOCKEDON, you will get your vintage hat for $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. Thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code LOCKEDON for an exclusive discount, because legends wear The Game, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Really impressive week one victory for Duke football over Elon. Of course, they played on Thursday night. We were able to recap the game on Friday with our pal Connor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. 45-17, the final score for Duke, who was tied with Elon at 10 once we got to halftime. Duke outscored the Phoenix 35-7 and looked like a totally different team there in the second half. It's going to be a big test for Duke coming up this week, though, as the Blue Devils will host Illinois, a top 15 team in the country. The Illini number 12 will have a new poll come out tomorrow this week, as still tonight we've got Labor Day football with the North Carolina Tar Heels having Bill Belichick's debut taking on TCU. So once that game concludes, a new poll comes out. We'll see if Illinois shifts at all. Nonetheless, a really good Fighting Illini team that Duke's going to welcome into Wallace Wade Stadium. Going to be a big test for the Blue Devils. Final score again, Duke wins 45-17 over Elon. Remember, Duke opened up with Elon in 2024. Back-to-back seasons, they played the very first same opponent. Last season, Duke won that game 26-3. So both teams scored a little bit more than they did in last year's meeting. Two things I liked, two things I didn't like. We'll start with the negatives here. For Duke defensively, we talked about this on Friday with Connor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. The tackling for Duke, I thought, left a whole lot to be desired. We're in an era where there's really just like 3 practices or so that teams are getting to practice tackling and hitting your teammates and that sort of thing. And so you finally come around to game time, and it felt like Duke just wasn't ready for that. The defenders were missing some tackles that they typically make, and I do think as the season moves forward, this will improve. There will be more reps for the Duke defense to take on and do that type of thing. But clearly in the opener, it was something that they hadn't been able to work on in quite some time. That's why Manny Diaz and so many other college football coaches are such big advocates for a preseason game of some sort, an exhibition of some kind to get your team ready to go, to let them practice some of those things like tackling. So I think that's got to clear up and clean up as Duke moves forward, particularly this weekend against Elon. I thought against Illinois. I thought Elon this past weekend was able to break a few too many tackles. And then another thing I didn't like, simply put, would be the running game for Duke offensively. Just not good, no matter what you are, or whatever way you look at it. I personally just wasn't too big of a fan of it. You look at the numbers there, 25 carries for 159 yards against Elon. That looks pretty good. It's an average of 6.4 yards per carry. But let's do this exercise. Let's take away the two big plays for Duke. There was the 32-yard touchdown run from Jaquez Moore, and then there was the 63-yarder from Anderson Castle. Those two runs combined for 95 yards. If you take those two carries away, then you're looking at Duke carrying the rock 23 times for about 60 yards, like 2 yards a carry for Duke. Last season, they're second to last in the ACC running the football, and looks like they might be on their way to doing that again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we see this offensive unit continue to improve week by week. The running backs continue to put their best foot forward, and we'll see Duke on the better end of things. If not, this could be one of the longer seasons running the football. We'll see. Fortunately for Duke, and one of the things I do like is that we've got Darian Mensah at quarterback. Therefore, you're able to overlook some of the running struggles. And again, let's look back at last season, guys. I mean, Duke did not run the football well. Like I just said, they were second to last in the entire conference running the football. And yet, Duke still went 9-3 on the season. There are multiple different ways to skin a cat, and Duke can run this offense in a number of different ways. I think Duke is holding back a little bit offensively in their RPO game with Darian Mensah. You didn't want to put too much on tape against Elon for what Illinois could prepare for this upcoming weekend because, throwing the football, Mensah's a baller. 389 yards passing, 27 of 34 attempts. That's an average of 11 yards an attempt. There are so many guys that you look at what Duke's doing passing the football, and over the years, the number might be high, but you kind of look at the averages and you realize it's a bunch of 4, 5, 6-yard passes down the field and then a whole lot of yards after catch. Not necessarily the case with Mensah. He's not afraid to throw it deep down the field and to make some plays with that wide receiver core. So Mensah's performance is certainly something that I like. And then also another thing that I like would be the receivers. First chance we really got to see Cooper Barkate and Andrew Anthony. Andrew Anthony, 3 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. Massive game for Cooper Barkate, who finished 5 catches, 117 yards, had a long of 46 mixed in there. And then who we're not including would be Quayshawn Brown and Samir Hagans. Shame on us, the guys returning to that receiver room for the Blue Devils. Quayshawn Brown, 6 catches, 93 yards. He had a punt return touchdown. Samir Hagans, 5 catches, 54 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving. These receivers are going to help out our guy Darian Mensah a whole lot, and I'm going to have so much fun watching them throughout the course of the season. So there you go. Big win for Duke over Elon again, 45-17. The game was tied at 10 at halftime. Duke outscores them 35-7 in the second half. So 2 things I don't like with the Duke football team from the game specifically, running the football and then tackling defensively. 2 things I did like, Darian Mensah's performance and the wide receiver stepping up in the first big glimpse that we have with them. All right, let's take a look at Illinois. That's Duke's opponent coming up this weekend there at Wallace-Wade Stadium. A noon Eastern kickoff. The game will televise on ESPN. Right now, ESPN Analytics and their Football Power Index give the Blue Devils a 50.6% chance to win. That means 49.4% chance for Elon. So 50-50. Super close game here. Our friends at FanDuel have Illinois favored to win by 2.5 points. I keep wanting to say Elon and Illinois, these first 2 opponents going back and forth. So really, really close game with these 2 teams. Luke Altmaier is the quarterback for Illinois. He used to play football at Ole Miss. It's his second season with the Illini, a really good team. They've got a couple of really good wide receivers and 3 different running backs to be on the lookout for. This past week, Illinois was favored by 40-plus points, and they found a way to cover. They beat Western Illinois by a score of 52-3. So they took care of business against their FCS opponent. Duke played an FCS opponent in Elon as well. So both teams played FCS schools. Both teams earned a win in week 1, and now we'll get set for this big-time battle. We'll see how good Darian Mensah and company are for Duke, and we'll continue to have more thoughts on this matchup as the week continues. In just a moment, on the other side of the break, we'll take a look around Duke athletics from this past weekend, give you a full recap, and start to wrap things up here when Locked On Blue Devils continues in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils brought to you by our friends over at Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to get Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked for you, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. It's completely online, connects you with a board-certified doctor, and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com, Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. Promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. Rugiet is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, we take a look around Duke athletics as we start to wind down our show here today. As this past weekend, Duke women's soccer got in the win column yesterday, the number 3 team in the country, Duke women's soccer, with a 1-0 victory over Creighton. Avery Oder scores the lone goal for the Blue Devils. She's a young freshman with 3 goals already on the season. In 4 matches, 3 goals for the freshman. She's going to be a superstar and a big-time player to watch out for Duke. Duke will host VMI coming up on Thursday for their 5th match of the season. Again, Duke women's soccer is 4-0 this year with wins over Penn State, Northwestern, and at Arkansas. Penn State was the number 11 team in the country in a true road game against Arkansas. This upcoming Sunday, Duke will host Alabama, so another SEC opponent. VMI on Thursday for the Blue Devils this week, and then women's soccer will play Alabama on Sunday. Duke men's soccer, they're number 9 in the country. So number 3 for the women's team, number 9 for the men's team. They tied 1-1 over the weekend with Furman. Duke already this season has a pair of wins over San Diego and UC San Diego. How odd is that? What an oddity in the schedule that is for Duke. Their first 2 matches of the season, they played San Diego, the number 10 team in the country. That's the Toreros, San Diego University. And then University of California at San Diego. That's the Tritons. Duke played them as well and won that. So they beat both of those schools and then most recently tied with Furman. So 2 wins for Duke, no losses, 1 tie so far. Duke men's soccer is going to be back in action on Friday when they take on Georgetown. It's a road game for the Blue Devils. Duke volleyball, they took a tough loss over the weekend to FIU in 4 sets. Duke volleyball off to a 1-2 record to start the year. Lost to FIU and Houston. Their 1 win so far this season is Bryant. So we'll see if Duke volleyball can turn around this start before they jump into conference play. Taking a look at this past weekend, we mentioned it on Friday, and going into the weekend, it was Pro Devils weekend for Duke basketball, and I, for one, absolutely loved all the content that Duke put out there for us. With all the former Duke basketball players back in the arena, we saw the likes of Paolo Banchero and Cooper Flagg and Jayson Tatum. We saw Cam Reddish. We saw Trevor Keels. We saw Marquise Bolden, Mason Plumlee, Justin Robinson. I mean, I'm going to start to forget guys that we saw footage of. Harry Giles was back on campus this past weekend for Duke, playing some pickup, getting some runs in with those guys. Good to see Tyrese Proctor, Sion James, some of the more recent guys there. Cameron Boozer has said before his favorite player was Paolo Banchero, and it looks like Duke gave us a teaser that Paolo and Cameron Boozer are going to be on an episode of the Brotherhood podcast coming out soon. So really can't wait to listen to that one. Austin Gooseby was in town on a recruiting visit. So again, really love when we have these big returning weekends for basketball and you're able to get all these superstars back in action to help with the recruiting pitch. There's just nothing like the Brotherhood, guys. Nothing like us out there, and really excited to see who's going to join forces with Duke in this recruiting class to come. So really excited for the week ahead here on Locked On Blue Devils. More coverage coming for Duke's game against Illinois. More basketball conversations as well as we're getting closer. September is here. September 1st today. And before you know it, we'll be playing Duke basketball, and I certainly can't wait for that. Follow us wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. A lot of fun content coming your way on those channels as well. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.